All right, y'all. Welcome to the show. Hopefully, you're having a good day. I certainly am because the reason why I'm having a good day is because we're about a week or so away from college football being back. Week zero will be here in about 8 days, 9 days or so. So it's getting closer, but loaded show for you guys today. A lot of things to discuss as per usual. Fall camp intel around this time of the year. Oh, plenty. We also have thoughts on what type of fan you are. Something I think a lot of folks haven't really talked about as we're getting closer to the start of the season. I just kind of feel like, you know what? When I bring this up, when I bring up what type of fan most of you are, or at least the categories of fans are out there. Of course, this is also being sparked by some things that were happening yesterday on the world of X, the wild and wonderful world of X over there. So we'll talk about that, I think, first, and then we'll dive into the teams in the Big 12 conference picks. We'll go into that, touch on the top three teams, the surprise team, whoever that's going to be. Then we'll go over the Big 12 title game and obviously the winner. And then we will move on to another topic we do have, which is not listed on the main topics here, or at least I think on the title. But we're going to go over team dynamics. Do they matter or not? We'll discuss that briefly. But yeah, welcome to the show. If you're new here, of course, we do this show twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, live here on YouTube. Spotify, of course, is the podcast feed. You can follow us on the socials, on X, Twitter. You can follow us on Instagram, even though we're not posting much over there yet. Hopefully soon. But be sure to do all that. Make sure it helps us out. It keeps this show free. We don't put this show behind a paywall. Just sit on a Patreon page, and I'll force you guys to sign up for giving me money. If you want to, that's up to you. I'm not forcing you to do that stuff, so you shouldn't have to do that. So be sure to, again, subscribe. If you have any friends that are, big college football fans that love college football, that want to have more shows you want to listen to, tell them to subscribe. So at least I would recommend doing that. Anyway, as I fix myself in my chair here, let's go ahead and jump right into skis, okay? So one of the things I wanted to discuss here at the top of the show is what type of fan are you, right? And this really happened, or at least this topic was more or less inspired by something that happened yesterday. And I want to pull this up real quick, graphic here to kind of show you guys what I'm talking about, because most of you probably don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm sure most of you've been on X and whatnot. You were on there yesterday and you're seeing a whole bunch of stuff about, skipping Saturdays. Like, who does that? Who's a fan that does that? So, Bud Elliott over on 247 Cover 3, CBS Sports, made a lot of noise yesterday about a graphic he posted, and I'll go ahead and post this on the YouTube side here, and I will. Here it is. Yeah, so here's the graphic here. As you can see, this is the graphic that Bud made yesterday, and it's on Spotify. Obviously, you can't see this. So the graph basically says, hey, yes, honey, weekends. Basically saying weekends you can take off, basically. Saturdays that you can safely make plans. And he mentions a couple of dates here, September 5th, which is, I believe, week one. Yeah, week one. December 19th is one, October 3rd, and then October 31st. Of course, that being Halloween, right? And I saw a lot of folks getting mad about this. Saw a lot of folks saying, "Oh, how dare you? You don't care about the sport. You're an asshole. You don't, what a buffoon you are, and what a, idiot you are for posting this because you hate college football, and we only get college football for only certain, months of the year." And whatnot. A lot of folks were going after Bud yesterday, and to a certain extent here, and I'll remove the graphic here just to you guys see my face here. Yeah. A lot of folks were giving him shit yesterday, and look, I understand that, right? There's sort of this weird battle here between, how people handle their Saturdays and how people handle their Saturday, how people handle their my computer here a little bit here. It's kind of in the way a little bit, but yeah, how people handle their Saturdays right now. What's their kind of threshold for being focused in? And there's kind of that dynamic here, right? You have folks who are kind of like, well, you can skip out on some Saturdays and whatnot. There's folks who are more where you can't do that. And there's kind of been that battle here. I think Josh Pate has been a very, very big opponent of skipping out on Saturdays, and his whole, don't train on Saturday tour name is really kind of becoming a battle cry now for him. So, that's kind of where this whole idea of this segment came up. And there was really three categories here of what type of fan you probably are, right? So the first one's pretty obvious. It's the casuals, right? Obviously, a reference to what Josh Pate has said, a reference to what Josh Pate has said in the past. Say that fast. Something that he has come up with, right? The casuals, right? The folks that are kind of like the flyby crowd, that kind of, oh yeah, college football, and we'll check it out, maybe for an hour or two, watch a game or two, then we'll move on. There's nothing wrong with those people necessarily. Like, it's cool you're watching the games. It's cool that you're kind of, paying attention a little bit, but they're not really the hardcore sicko fans, right? They're the fans that, again, they're the drive-by crowd. They kind of go, oh yeah, college football, and they maybe go on X and Twitter and they post something about it, and maybe not necessarily knowing what they actually are talking about, but they exist out there. I don't necessarily hate them, but there's folks who do hate them. But there's definitely one type of casual that I will admit that I'm not the biggest fan of, and that's the crossover the crossover casuals, the ones that come from the NFL, that watch the NFL, they're hardcore NFL fans, but then they watch college football and they shit on it because, oh, it's not the NFL and it's too un-NFL and it's not too much like the NFL and whatnot. And those are the ones that I really don't give a shit about. Like, you guys can go cry me a fucking river. So, yeah, the casuals are definitely one category. Then there's the hardcore and the sickos. Now, this category is probably where I'm at, right? I watch all the games every single Saturday when I get done whatever I'm doing in the morning. Usually my routine, at least as of late, has been, you get up and go for your run in the mornings before it gets too ridiculously hot or before the games start. Get back, have your breakfast, and sit down. Maybe, at least of me, there's a convenience store literally right in front of my apartment. So I go over there and get my case of beer for the day and head back over here and plop myself on the couch. I don't do nothing for the rest of the day, right? Watch all the games, watch the noon kickoffs, the 3:30s, 8 o'clocks, and then whatever's on at 10 or 11, and then you go to bed. And get up the next morning, do the whole routine to get ready for the NFL Sunday, right? As a Bucks fan, you have to do the whole thing over again, right? So that's the hardcores, right? Those are the ones that stay up and watch all the games, at least try to watch all the games. Now, of course, there are certain games you can't watch, particularly the ones that are on, like, ESPN Plus or Peacock. Like, obviously, you can't really watch those, but there's workarounds around that. Like, folks have live streamed some of the ESPN Plus games on YouTube, so you can do that as well. But anyway, so that's the hardcore fans. Those are the fans that are the ones that will always be there, right? Even with all the changes going on in the sport, with whether it's playoff expansion, NIL, all of the noise that's going on, all of the crap that's kind of going on behind the scenes, those fans will always be there, right? They'll always be there and they'll always watch the games. Those are also the ones that don't necessarily rely on the postseason. These are the ones that love the regular season. The casuals and the next group we're going to talk about are the ones that kind of do prefer the postseason, which I also disagree with, of course, because I'm a regular season first type of person, right? I love the rivalry games. I love, the interconference games, and I'm not really a big fan of the postseason games. Yes, those are the ones that the oligarchs and the TV Mongols love, of course, as it makes them the most money. But I myself, that I think most of you watching the show, don't really give a shit about the postseason. Like, the national title, like, that's a little bit different, but like any of these bowl games and stuff like that, well, it's fun to watch those. That's not the reason why we're here. We are here to watch, Texas and Oklahoma in the Red River Shootout. We're here watching Mississippi State versus LSU. Yes, that's not really a fair rivalry, but you understand what I mean. We're here to watch Minnesota versus Penn State. We're here to watch, Akron versus Miami of Ohio, right? Like, we're the ones who will attempt to watch those games. So those are the hardcore and the sickos. Now, the next category here is the one I really want to talk about here, and that's the ones that signed up yesterday. Not to be confused with the casuals. The casuals are, again, kind of, the ones that do watch, but they don't watch all the games. And then you have the NFL mixture there a little bit, the combination of college football and NFL fans that are more NFL fans but claim they watch college football, but they really don't. But the ones that signed up yesterday, I'm really talking to basically the bandwagon fans. And this is happening extremely a lot with Indiana fans. And look, I know there's a lot of Indiana fans out there that do exist organically. They've been cheering for the team, especially in basketball. Kind of like Kentucky fans, you have football, but it's kind of like, football was always winning an average of 2 games per year. So, well, wait until basketball season and, hopefully they'll make it to the NCAA tournament, right? But now you're really starting to hear a major, I don't know what you call it, like an epidemic, if you will, of people, assholes, if you will, who are claiming to be lifelong Indiana fans that will come after you and get mad at you about your preseason poll, like most of you did the other day. And again, like I said on the Tuesday show, I knew exactly what was going to happen. As soon as I posted that on the replies of On3's post about the AP poll preseason, I knew it was going to be a social media nuclear bomb going off, right? Not even a tactical nuke. Might as well be like an ICBM going off, right? Very, very morbid comparison there, but that's basically what it is, okay? So I knew immediately what was going to happen. All of the random, you know, folks will start commenting. Some of them are legit fans, and some of them had understandable gripes, but again, it's a preseason poll, so who really gives a shit? But the ones that really, really, really were fascinating to watch here, the ones that I were kind of like, the ones that I really, really were fascinated by seeing in the replies were the ones who signed up yesterday. Because if you go to their profiles, then especially the ones who had the photo of Kirk Cincinnati on there and their profile, you go on their profiles and you go, oh, they joined X conveniently in December of 2025 or January of 2026. Oh, okay. So obviously you're a fucking flyby fan, and we're not even a flyby. You signed up yesterday. You did. You signed up yesterday. You can get mad at me in the comments and say you're a hater and you're a troll. That's the way I see it. You basically signed up yesterday. So those are the fans that really, really dislike, and you've seen a lot of this of like the bigger programs like Bama, Georgia over the years. Some LSU fans are kind of like that. But again, even with those programs, there is a actual organic fan base. Again, I'm not saying all Indiana fans are ones who signed up yesterday. I know there are some of you out there, probably, that aren't Indiana football fans, but because your program was so bad, you have to focus on like basketball or water polo or track and field, which, hey, someone who did cross country and track in high school, look, I have nothing against that. But to say that there is not a whole segment of Indiana fans that signed up yesterday, to say that that's not real, you're a liar. That is true. And you really see this too in the NFL, especially with Chiefs fans and now with Seahawks fans, probably a lot of fans who sign up yesterday and go, oh, I've been a Seahawks fan for 2 years or, 5 years or whatever. And you sort of begin to realize, oh, you've really been a fan at least recently because they won the Super Bowl. And also as a Bucs fan, we saw this a lot too with Tampa Bay when they won the Super Bowl with Tom Brady in 2020. I was a Bucs fan before that. I had to endure the Jameis Winston years, which mainly sucked. So yeah, the one that really does annoy me is definitely the ones who signed up yesterday. I have no patience for those people at all. So yeah, those are basically the two categories of fans. You have the casuals, hardcore sickos, the hardcore / sickos, and then you have the ones who signed up yesterday, the bandwagoners, if you will. Again, I know there's a lot of folks are going to get mad at me for bringing up Indiana as an example of that, but that's just the one I've seen a lot lately. It's getting pretty annoying. And again, I have no problem with you guys, watching college football. I'm not saying you should, but I'm just telling you that those folks are out there. You need to understand that those folks have only been fans for less than a year, and they don't know the sport. They don't know that the regular season does matter. They don't even probably know that Indiana and Purdue is a massive rivalry. At least it should be, but because neither side has been very good at certain times, and that's just not the case. So yeah, what type of fan are you? Let me know in the comment section, or I guess in the live chat if you're anyone watching, what type of fan you actually are. So I'll be really curious to see what would the numbers be and whatnot, and the analytics and stuff. But I think there's definitely a lot of folks who I think would fit into the hardcore sickos category, but I'm sure some of you will probably say, yeah, I'll admit I'm a casual. But again, a lot of this again was mainly surrounding that graphic that Bud Elliott over at 247 was putting out about Wiggins and Skip. And again, to me personally, I wasn't really a big fan of that. To be clear, I mentioned, I believe on X yesterday, look, the Halloween one, the part where you mentioned, hey, if there's a weekend you have to skip, the one I sort of agree with is Halloween, but on the flip side, you can combine a trick-or-treating and a Halloween party with college football, right? I mean, heck, my family did that back when I was growing up. So that's not really one that I would say is like, it's understandable because it's trick-or-treating, especially if you have, youths who are, really, really young, like the little ones, right? That's understandable. It's like, yeah, obviously these are memories and stuff that you want to remember, but if they're slightly older and they're kind of in that middle school range, it's like, okay, it's like, dad can, stay behind, drink beer and whatnot and have fun and with any of his older buddies and stuff, or his friends and whatnot, while I guess the wives go out trick or treating. So there is kind of a way you can combine both and whatnot. But I get it if you really want to go out and trick or treat with your kids, especially again the younger ones, which is again you're making and creating memories and stuff. So that one is the only one I can say. Yeah, I get it. I get it. But the rest of them, the rest of the other ones, especially, it's like, I mean, look, even if those weeks are shitty, but and look, week one in terms of marquee matchups, I agree with Bud. It's not great, but I also agree with everyone else saying, well, I mean, we have been waiting 8 months and stuff for college football, so it's like kind of shitty. You have to kind of, you know, say the quiet part out loud. Really say the quiet part out loud about week one, which is, and again, he's being brutally honest. Yes, it is. It's a shitty week, but at least in my opinion, I wouldn't really, I don't feel comfortable going that direction. I don't really think it's appropriate to really go that direction and say that you can really skip week one and just completely skip it entirely. I think there's a lot of folks, even including me, will be watching week one. Maybe not all of the games. Again, most of them are, the Power Four teams versus some of the G5s and FCS, but there's games, they exist, right? The games exist, so why not watch them? But there are games that do exist out there in week one. But unfortunately, though, most of them are neutral site games, not games that are on campus, which are games I prefer watching. But that's a little of a discussion that we've exhausted here at multiple times, if you will. Let's see here. Moving right along, Big 12, Big 12 conference picks. Last one, then next we'll be doing the CFP picks. We'll be filling out our first official bracket. So there was that. How about that? So I'm going to get some water real quick. Been saying a lot of so's. I'll get some water real quick, and then we'll be right back. So nothing's happening with your audio on YouTube or on Spotify. It should be fine. I mean, the microphone's on. I know last show on Tuesday, the microphone, I guess I accidentally turned it off. So apologies for that, but luckily didn't miss like the majority of the show. So luckily I was able to save it. But yes, I'm aware that 5 minutes into last show, especially on YouTube, there's no audio and, happens sometimes. Anyway, I'm going to get some water real quick, and then we'll be right back here in a second. And I got to put up this graphic here, so stand by as I do that. Like I said, as we're here, again, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the streams, like the videos, follow us on the social media platforms. Think you guys get it if you're a returning viewer. If you're a new viewer too, just not a bad reminder to make sure you're subscribed. And if you think you are subscribed, make sure you freaking double check, because we know we get the analytics and stuff. It's not, it's not a secret that we can see all that stuff. So there's a lot of evidence that suggests that some of you watching this aren't subscribed. So just make sure you are. Okay, let me pull up this graphic, and then we'll. At least hopefully this will be the right one. I was making these last night, so let's see. I think it is. Is it this one? Yeah, it is this one. All right, good. So on Spotify, obviously you can't see this graphic here, this wonderful graphic we have. But of course on YouTube you can't see it. So for the Spotify folks, I'll just have to read this off to you. But anyway, no big deal. So Big 12 championship, or not? Well, we are picking that technically, but Big 12 conference picks. Been doing all the other conferences so far. We have not done the Big 12 yet, which is interesting. It's definitely one of the, either them or the ACC, one of the weaker conferences. But as Josh Pate says, it is America's college football conference. Even still, given that it's, the competitive balance is shifting a little bit, but there's still some value here. It's still a very, very fascinating conference. There's a whole bunch of teams that could easily win the conference. Now, there's one team that we know for sure can win it. There's a lot of other teams that are kind of, I can see them going over this team over that. So the top 3 teams in the Big 12 for 2026, the ones that, again, how this works if you're new here. The top 3 here that I listed on this graphic, or if you're on Spotify, the way I'm going to do this is that the top 2 teams are the teams I'm picking to go to the conference championship. Number 3 is a team that's just barely left out. Okay, so they barely missed out. Now, those that guarantee will be a playoff team, and most conferences like the SEC and the Big 10, yes. for the ACC and the Big 12, unfortunately, probably not. So the two teams in the Big 12 that I think will be in the conference title game will be Texas Tech at number 1 and BYU at number 2. Number 3 is Houston. They barely make it out. Of course, we know Coach Willie Fritz, big fan of his. He's done a fantastic job there at Houston, taking over for Dana Holgerson. They are probably going to start Connor Wegman at quarterback, though I do believe, what's his name? Keyshawn Henderson, I believe. I think that's his name. Make sure, if I got that right. Anyway, the 5-star QB that they got this past recruiting cycle, I think he will eventually start. Again, could be like a Clemson circa 2018 where they started out the veteran guy and Kelly Bryant, then they eventually moved on to Trevor Lawrence. I can see that happening here at Houston if Wegman is performing okay, but Henderson, I believe that's who it is, yeah, it starts to really turn a lot of heads, and I think there might be a pull there to get him to start because, again, he's a 5-star guy. You don't bring him there to sit on the bench most of the time. So, just barely missing out on the conference title game is going to be Houston, unfortunately. But I still think they'll be a good team, but that also means, again, because this is the Big 12, and again, they are one of the weaker Power 4, at least one of the weakest of the Power 4 conferences are going to be left out. Nothing against Houston, but I just feel like they'll definitely be in the mix. Interestingly enough, Texas Tech and Houston do play each other, I believe, on that Friday, week 4, week 5, or something like that. And of course, Texas Tech is number 1 because they are the most talented team in the Big 12. A lot of credit to Joe McGuire and company, both in recruiting and the transfer portal. Yes, they're not going to be having their original starting quarterback, Brendan Sorsby. They do have options at quarterback. And like we saw from my preseason poll, I did drop them down just a little bit. Now, not because I hate them. No, I still think Joe McGuire and them that's still a formidable team. And I think that they could, do a lot of damage there and really kind of put a stranglehold, if you will, on the conference in terms of who's going to be the top team. But there's still questions there at quarterback. And look, Will Hammond's not an idiot. Clearly he's not. And he filled in at times last year, to an extent, with injuries with the starter from last year. So, we'll see. And again, they're a very talented team. I just feel like that there's really, like, BYU, for example. Look, I also like Kalani Sitake. I think they're, again, another team that has a lot of experience coming back. You have your quarterback coming back. You have a lot of our vets of the team that, do match up pretty well, at least match up better than, or at least are a lot better than other teams in the conference, right? But even there, it's, I can see someone else jumping them, maybe Houston or someone else, but clearly the number 1 team, at least in my opinion, is Texas Tech. Then you have BYU, then you have Houston. Now, the surprise team, and I've really explained this one, Kansas State. Now, I'm sure a lot of you in Stillwater, Oklahoma, or Oklahoma State fans are going, huh? Why not us? Like, we're literally, like, they being Oklahoma State, and they imported a whole bunch of players, or at least like half of the roster, or like 90% of it, from North Texas with Eric Morris. And they've upgraded at basically every position. I agree with that. You did, right? You've upgraded at quarterback, you upgraded at running back, you upgraded at wide receiver, you upgraded pretty much everywhere. What you had last year under, or what you had last season under Mike Gundy before he got fired. I totally agree with that. But there's the caveat here of Oklahoma State. Again, I'm only doing this to be cautionary here. Again, I understand there's a lot of folks saying, oh, this could be like Coach Signetti. Well, no. Not everyone's Coach Sig. Nothing against Eric Morris, but he is not Coach Sig. He is not, at least in my opinion and my observations, he is not. But the only the asterisk here, that's not the actual asterisk I'm talking about. The asterisk with Oklahoma State is that they are literally importing a G5 team, okay? And the players on Oklahoma State's roster to begin with, going back to last year, were already sort of in that G5 quality of players. So it wasn't like a good roster to begin with, right? It wasn't like when Coach Sig went to Indiana. There was already players that were good enough to be on a P4 roster, right? Or in this case, the P2. So that's a little bit different. So with Oklahoma State, you're literally have a G5 roster on supposedly a Power 4 team. Again, yes, you upgraded at certain parts of the team. Yes, you upgraded at quarterback and Mestamaker. That's great. He doesn't do some good stuff there. I just caution you, it's not necessarily, at least in my opinion, it's not probably going to go the way you think it's going to go. It's not a ready product. It's still going to be a situation where it's going to be a transitional phase. These guys are not used to playing in a league that is way more talented than the G5. So that's the caveat there why Oklahoma State is not the team I'm choosing here. Now, the team I'm choosing here, it's Kansas State. Colin Klein is back there as a head coach. He was there as the OC for a number of years under Chris Kleiman. Of course, he being Colin Klein went to Texas A&M, did a lot of good stuff for Marcel Reed. Now he's back there. He has Avery Johnson back for it feels like his 10th year, but he's only been there for a couple of years, right? Last year was a struggle for them, which is part of the reason why I think the administration told Chris Kleiman, hey, you better fucking resign and retire or we're going to fire you. Because last year did not go very well. And this is a team that, much like this year, last year, I thought was going to be a very good team. So I drank the Kool-Aid on them last year. I'm doing it again. And the only reason why is because, again, they're bringing in Colin Klein, who at Kansas State as a player, if you maybe you were a little too young to remember this, he was a Heisman candidate in 2012. He was, I believe, even at the top for a little bit before Manziel ultimately kind of took control of it, especially after beating Bama. But Colin Klein was up there at Kansas State as the lead Heisman candidate for about a month. And he sort of like Avery Johnson is kind of in that category of like Dak Prescott, where he's like a really, really good power runner. Not the best stuff throwing the football, but his running skill set, it's deadly, man. It's definitely efficient when you're dealing with like 3rd and shorts, 3rd and 5 and less. That is almost a guaranteed first down. So that combination there with him and Colin Klein, that offense, it's going to be something that I'm very fascinated to watch. I think it can work. And again, this being America's College Football Conference, as Josh Pate puts it, I can definitely see this being a year where Kansas State could surprise some folks. It's not a guarantee. I know it does sound like I'm once again drinking the Kool-Aid. There's a lot of other teams I could again put on here. I could have put Oklahoma State on here. I could have put Arizona State on here. I could have put Arizona on here. I could have put Kansas on here. Probably not. I could have also put, a whole bunch of other teams, right? But I just felt like Kansas State, with that combination, again, all that familiarity from what you have with Colin Klein and him being a former player, and he's, back at his alma mater, that he is taking over the team, and he's working with a quarterback that fits this system, and is literally similar to what he was at when he was playing there. I just think that's a good combination. It's a very, very combustible combination, and in a good way. It's not combustible in a bad way. It's just I feel like there's a lot of possibilities here that could be unlocked. Now, look, it could go spectacularly horrible. It could go pretty bad. It could go in a different direction to where it's in a bit of a spiral phase, if you will, that it can go well. But I have a feeling it could be a bit of an interesting year for them, and certainly a team that I'll be watching with a lot of interest. So, surprise team Kansas State. Now, again, the Big 12 title game, based on the way I just put the top 3 teams there, it will be BYU and Kansas State. A rematch of last year. So, and much like last year, I do have Texas Tech winning the game. Just, to me, again, the talent gap here, even with, maybe you're not preferred starting quarterback, because, again, with Brandon Storsby being out, or at least no longer playing college football, yes, there is a situation here where you might be downgrading at quarterback, but the rest of the talent is still there. And again, I understand a lot of folks, both privately and even vocally, when I posted my preseason poll, we're kind of going, you have Texas Tech all the way below Kansas State. Like, what's that all about? Well, I just feel like Kansas State has a better quarterback edge than Texas Tech. Let's just be real here. Like, would you choose Avery Johnson over Will Hammond? I wouldn't. I think Avery Johnson has a lot more skill sets that make him a little bit more valuable because he can run. And, I'm not saying Will Hammond is a statue, but it's just the skill set thing here. There is a bit of a, I don't know, like a more of a different vibe with Avery Johnson that you, again, paired with the right system and the right head coach and the right offensive, doctrine, I mean, you can really see him take off. And again, nothing against Will Hammond. I mean, Will Hammond should be fine as a starter for Texas Tech. That is a bit of a downgrade. But everything else about the team of Texas Tech, defensive line, offensive line, wide receivers, basically the entire roster, is miles way better than BYU, Houston, and Kansas State combined. Maybe not necessarily a quarterback for most of these teams, but everywhere else, lines of scrimmage, which is the most key facet of any team, it's better than everyone else. So I really don't think there's any other team on here that I can really see be a actual natural threat. Now, again, could I see BYU be replaced by someone else in this in the title game, like with a Houston or a Kansas State? I could. It's not impossible. Like, they wouldn't shock me. But at the moment, as I'm recording this at noon Eastern here on August 20th, I just feel like Texas Tech, again, because of the talent gap here and how superior they are to some of these other teams, I just don't really see any of these teams, any of these teams really being an actual threat. Now, the only way this could go wrong, and sounds like I'm previewing the game, but I'm not, The only way you could see Texas Tech really losing a game in conference or just to or any game in conference, whether it's in the regular season or in the conference style game, it's really going to have to come down to, and I'll make this quick here. It's really going to have to be any of these teams going against Texas Tech. You're going to have to use asymmetrical warfare pretty much, kind of doing things a little bit different. Like, for example, if it is BYU, running or at the very least trying to run the football and, try to do kind of what you did last year probably won't work, right? Again, this is mainly the same roster you had last year besides some of the seniors leaving and stuff like that. Still the same quarterback, still the same offensive philosophy and doctrine. So they're going to have to get more asymmetrical. They're going to have to do things a little bit differently to kind of try to beat Texas Tech. Because doing things like, for example, Oregon last year, right in the playoff game, they could have ran a basic offense and beaten Texas Tech because their talent is just a little bit better than theirs. And, there was also, even last year, of the quarterback situation, still some limitations. So that's why Oregon did what they did against Texas Tech. These teams are not Oregon. These teams are not any of those caliber teams. These teams have to use a little bit more of different tactics to beat them, right? Whether it's Kansas State or Houston, BYU, I mean, I'm sure these coaching staffs know that. You have to go a little bit more asymmetrical. This is not, a team that you can just beat by, bringing the football up the middle and, if the down or if the drive ends in the kick, doesn't matter, right? That's not how you're going to beat them. At least with when comparing the talent levels of Texas Tech to the rest of the Big 12, now comparing Texas Tech to the rest of the Power 4, especially the P2, the top of the P2, that's different, okay? They don't have to use asymmetrical warfare. They can just beat them because they're way more talented. They have coaching staffs are way more smarter than them, okay? There's a bit of a degree of smartness that Texas Tech may not necessarily have and whatnot in terms of, coaching wise. Nothing against Joey McGuire, but let's just be real. Dave Lanning's a lot better coach than Joey McGuire is, okay? Even though some folks, may disagree with that, but, to all themselves, it is what it is. So, yeah, to recap, the top 3 teams in the conference, at least the way I think this will finish, Texas Tech 1, BYU 2, so they'll be in the Big 12 title game. Then you'll have Houston finishing at 3. The surprise team's Kansas State. Big 12 title game, again, rematch of last year, BYU, Texas Tech. I do have Texas Tech beating Brigham Young in the Big 12 title game again. So unless any of these teams can apply some sort of like asymmetrical warfare, or maybe it's a situation where Texas Tech has a lot of turnovers and stuff like that in a single game, and the game just gets out of control. Show me, surprise me, because I really don't know if any of the teams exist out there to at least beat Texas Tech, at least to beat Texas Tech. Now, beyond Texas Tech, yeah, I could see a Houston or a Kansas State making it to Dallas, but at the moment, at least in this point, before the season is starting, I do have BYU being a number 2 instead of someone else. And that also means, again, I think Texas Tech, much like last year, and as it probably should be, will be the only representative to go to the college football playoff from the Big 12. Everyone else, thank you for playing. So, anyway, moving right along. One thing I did want to hit up here, real quick, little mini topic here I threw in last night that I originally wasn't going to talk about, but I decided now why not just talk about it. Is do team dynamics really matter? Which is something I think a lot of folks don't really talk about a whole lot, but if you're a college football sicko like me, you kind of understand the whole idea of quitting, like teams quitting pretty early. You may see this with a certain amount of teams this year, right? For example, not to dog on them because we'll be talking about them here, this team here in a minute with the fall camp intel, but South Carolina. That's going to be a team that if things really go off the rails early, if they start losing games early and they're not really competitive and whatnot, South Carolina and the SEC in particular is a team that can really quit early. And that's where the team dynamics really start to get into play here, the negativity, the psychological factor. I'm not trying to be a psychiatrist here, but let's just be real. All these guys are human. All these guys are 18 to 24-year-olds or they have lives outside of football, and if things go south, they can get distracted easily and whatnot. And it's just, those things do matter. And it happens every single year. You can go back all across history. Last year, for example, of Auburn, same thing. The psychological factor, the quit factor, you kind of saw that happen last year. You saw it happen with South Carolina at times last year as well. You saw it at Mississippi State with Zach Arnett back in, 2023, I believe. Same idea. So or Penn State, another example. You saw them kind of quit after they lost to Oregon. So again, that's it's a interesting dynamic, and it does happen. I know a lot of folks kind of tend to ignore it because they think, NIL can keep these guys happy. That's not a guarantee, especially if any of these guys are transfers. If you're a transfer-laden team, it's not good. Like, obviously, another example here is Florida State. Heavy on the transfer portal. Not necessarily a good thing, okay? Like, let's not be around the bush here. That's another team, too, with Florida State, Mike Norvell, that if things go south, and, Bud, speaking of him earlier, Bud Elliott has mentioned this before, and I kind of think this is interesting. With Florida State, and this happened last year, and this has happened, over the last few years after, since 2023, and the snub is that the way of Mike Norvell, and, not to be mean, but from what Bud's described Mike Norvell and the way he handles things is that he gets very much so like a Southern preacher and whatnot. He starts getting very like, spiritual and whatnot, and he starts yelling and stuff, and when the team's losing and stuff, and the morale of the team really and truly is just that doesn't do anything for the team. And I think a lot of folks, even last year, from what he was hearing, in terms of the players, were kind of like, really, like this is how you're gonna have us try to motivate us by saying you got to respond, guys. You got to respond, and it's always gonna be a sick joke. So yeah, team dynamics and crap like that, it's just not gonna fly. I know a lot of folks kind of try to kind of ignore it and go, oh, the dynamics don't really matter. Again, these guys have NIL, right? They're gonna be fine. Well, that's not a guarantee. That doesn't help anything. That kind of, well, I'm not gonna say it makes it like totally worse, but it could make it worse, right? Again, with Florida State, a lot of these guys who are there right now on the roster, a lot of them are mercenaries. They're not there to, they're not bought into the Florida State logo. They're not bought into the culture of Florida State. They're not. All these guys were at other schools. Like, for example, Ashton Daniels at Auburn last year and Stanford before that. He's not bought into Florida State. He's not bought into the culture. He's not brought into the traditions. So things aren't going south for those guys, especially. They're not bought in, so they'll quit it even faster than South Carolina will, because South Carolina is mainly made up of players that they've recruited organically, right? So team dynamics here. Again, I know a lot of folks tend to ignore that factor. I was like, that's not really that important. It is important, and I am afraid for some of these teams, like in Mississippi State or South Carolina or Florida State. Teams like that, even and to a certain extent, Washington, right? With the whole, again, going back to the whole DeMond Williams thing and that occurred in January and December, with him threatening the transfer and kind of making all these maximalist deals and things like that, or making all these maximalist threats about him wanting to leave and stuff like that, and him making that announcement or him hinting at transferring during when the entire school was doing the whole funeral for the volleyball player that passed away. So again, the timing back then was kind of weird, and the vibes there were weird going into spring practice, and now things have supposedly simmer down, but things got rough there in Washington, over there in Seattle. It's not necessarily a guarantee that those things will not be forgotten. That those things could very easily creep back in, and potentially in the dark locker room, the dynamic could change very quickly, and players, could potentially start saying stuff. Oh, you're the same guy that threatened to leave during that funeral thing. Oh, well, fuck you. So again, dynamics here do matter here, and I think a lot of folks who are blissfully unaware that, oh, well, NIL can fix the whole thing because players are getting paid. No, you're wrong. A lot of folks don't realize that when SHTF happens for some of these teams and shit hitting the fan, and things will really start hitting the fan, right? Again, Florida State, big example of this. Of all these guys who are transfers and not bought into the Florida State culture, don't give a shit about the traditions. Things are going south, and especially with head coach Mike Norvell, who we have seen evidence of that players don't respect him anyway. Why are they going to be bought in when SHTF happens with the team? If things really start going off the rails and whatnot, they're not going to be bought into it. So, again, a lot of these folks who are unaware of that, who aren't necessarily fully understanding the fact that these dynamics do exist, and it happens anywhere, really. I mean, if you do deal with organizational communication, which is a class I'm taking, by the way, that it's a really important thing to really have a good culture and buy-in. And that's one of the things where you really, really need to pay attention to, especially if you're going into the workforce, anything like that. Same thing in college football, right? Team dynamics. Again, they really do matter. And if it's a culture that is kind of in that scenario where things have been bad already, and there's been history of people disrespecting the leader, in this case being Mike Norvell, it's a very, very combustible mixture. And it's not something I enjoy talking about, but let's just be real. Again, a lot of folks are really not fully aware that this is something that can happen to anyone. any team really. It can happen to LSU. It can happen last year to a certain extent with Brian Kelly. It can happen with Georgia. It can happen with Clemson. Clemson's number one too, right? Everyone just assumes that Dabo Swinney and Clemson, that whole the Clemson culture and the all-in factor of the family stuff and whatnot, and Dabo being kind of like the fatherly figure for all these players. A lot of folks just assumed for a while that that thing was never going to crack open. That thing was never going to go up the escalation ladder and really spiral out of control. Kind of happened last year, huh? Like explain the loss to Syracuse. Explain a lot of the losses that happened last year. That's exactly what happened. The culture there started to collapse. It wasn't the it wasn't the non it wasn't this mighty thing that couldn't be penetrated, right? It was penetrable. It got damaged. They got dinged down. So team dynamics, they do matter. And I think, again, a lot of folks are just blissfully unaware, if you will. So we wanted to throw that in there as we're beginning the season. Again, there's a lot of teams out there that I'll be watching for that could potentially be in that quit factor mode pretty early. Florida State's one. South Carolina's one. Washington is also one as well. Very, very fragile locker rooms here. Okay. Moving right along, and then we'll get out of here. Oregon. Well, before we get to Oregon, fall camp intel, right? That time of the year, again, as fall camps are progressing, we're getting more intel and stuff. So Oregon, as I mentioned, haven't talked about a whole lot about them, right? Kind of been a team that we haven't really mentioned yet, which we should mention them a whole lot earlier. Dante Moore, back there. If you're just getting back in the college football, if you don't remember, yes, he did not go into the NFL draft. He is back. So he is their starting quarterback there. They do, again, remember, have a new offensive coordinator. They promoted from within because Will Stein is at Lexington, Kentucky now. He's no longer in Eugene, Oregon, which, again, I feel like a lot of folks probably don't even remember or even recognize that. So he is there. Now, there is some concern there before Oregon about, hey, look, you're bringing in this new offensive coordinator. Again, you have a defensive-minded coach. And it's kind of the same thing with, if you want to go to the comparison with the team I cheer for in the NFL, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, same situation with Oregon, right? Defensive-minded coach with Todd Bowles. He's had multiple offensive coordinators. Two of them really good, right? Back-to-back. Dave Canales, Liam Cohn, bang, bang. Then you promote after Liam Cohn leaves, and, eventually you're probably going to get one of these offensive coordinator hires wrong, and they kind of did last year. That's the fear of Oregon, is that all the success they've had here with offensive coordinator changeover, and it's worked out for the most part, eventually you're going to have a situation where you're going to get one of these wrong. Is that going to happen here? I don't know. But there's still a lot of talent here, right? You have Dante Moore. You have Evan Stewart back after missing all of last year. Tight end, you lose Sadiq. He's off the NFL now. He's playing for the Jets, I believe. If you have Tamari Johnson, who looks like he's going to be the number one starting tight end, but we'll see. The offensive line situation, you have junior Fox Carter. Looks like he's going to be taking over there for left tackle. Right tackle position, kind of in competition, but it looks like Zier Anderson kind of looks like he'll be getting that role. It looks like that's kind of those are names that are be kind of floating out there. Of course, again, Fox Carter. He's been there. Or Fox, is it Fox Carter or Fox Trader? I don't know. He's been there for a little bit, so he's not an older player. But anyway, that's Oregon there again. The offensive side of the football, I am more or less. I'm not worried about. I'm just curious about. And again, I know they also replaced. They had to replace focus on the defense, but as long as Dane Lanning's there and then it is his defensive style there, it's his DNA all over it. Of course, he is a defensive-minded coach. That side of the football, I'm not worried about. The opposite side, the offense, I am more worried about in terms of how it's going to look and whatnot. Just again, being a Buccaneers fan and having to deal with the same issues with having a defensive coach and losing two really good offensive coordinators back to back. It seems like it's not a it's a very, very it's a very, very interesting thing to worry about, or not a. I don't know why I just sit there. It's something to worry about, as I'm trying to say. It's not something you just can't ignore. So, moving right along here, Utah, haven't talked about them that much. Devon Dampier, still there. Yes, to have the coaching change and whatnot. And that's kind of the thing I'm interested about with them is that he was so good last year with the offensive system that they had there with Kyle Cunningham. Obviously not there anymore. It's a new regime there, though. It's people you're familiar with. It's they just removed their their defensive coordinator. Who is it? Morgan Scally, I believe. So he's the head coach there now. We'll see how he looks. Again, kind of this, the whole idea of promoting a defensive-minded coach as a head coach. Is he a Muschamp clone? Is he a defensive-minded coach that's not, doesn't really pay attention to the offense and whatnot? That's kind of a concern I think most people are going to have for any defensive-minded coach, especially, ones that are not necessarily going to be running a unique offense. So we'll see with Utah. And, that's kind of an interesting thing that this will be the first time since 2004 when Urban Meyer was there that you're going to have a new head coach there, or at least a different head coach that's not named Kyle Whittingham. So, again, we'll see with Dan Pierre. Again, he is supposedly progressing. There's some good feedback coming out there. But, until we see them on the field and they start playing teams that actually have a pulse, we'll have an idea of where they actually are. And, again, we'll see with Morgan Scally. Is he a Muschamp clone? Is he a Muschamp clone? Is he necessarily a defensive coach that takes offense seriously? If that's the case, good for him. If he's not, then that might be bad news for Utah. Now, South Carolina, I mentioned him earlier. Not to add more insult to injury here. Dylan Stewart, Jacarius Peak, two of their star players, unlikely to start the year. That came out last night from a lot of different sources, 247 on 3, which is not good on top of all the injuries. It just feels like South Carolina, man. What is it with injuries? It's like a mass unit out there. It's like, all these guys are like going down and stuff. Now, they will be back, but they're not going to be ready for week 1 and like week 2. So they're going to be out. So Lenora Sellers is literally going to have to be a one-man show, it seems like. And that's not good, again, given how, badly this could go for South Carolina. Again, like I mentioned earlier, if they start losing games, the quit factor does, they're going to be on quit watch, right? I think a lot of folks would probably agree with me on that. So those are two injuries there with Peak and Stewart. Those are two guys you can't lose, at least for the entire season. So it's a good thing it's not a season-ending thing, but that is something that it needs to be watching. And for Texas, I believe the offensive linemen should be okay. It's not a season-ending thing, but that's something you mentioned on. Excuse me, I have a piece of dust on my nose there. But that's something we've also mentioned on Tuesday, right? The issues here with the offensive line at Texas. Again, it's not. I think sigh of relief there. Wasn't the 4-alarm fire, total disaster over there. But, he won't be much like with Dylan Stewart and Javarius Peak here. Similar situation won't be ready for the beginning of the season, which is, not good and not ideal because you do play Ohio State week 1, kind of a big deal, or week 2, kind of a big deal. So, anyway, fall camp until there. Again, a lot of bad news there for South Carolina, but, is what it is. You can't, that's one of the things of fall camps and stuff. You see this too, the NFL, the same thing. Injuries are going to happen. That's just part of the sport, and you got to make sure you have good depth. And if you don't have a good depth, then it really is going to be SHTF because you don't have all the adequate depth to really supplement the top players, and that is kind of a thing that needs to be something that folks need to be more or less aware of. So. Anyway, anything else to add on here? I don't think so. So we'll be back next week as per usual, same time as usual. No real changes there. I don't think we're doing an extra pod this week. We're not going to have the time for it, unfortunately, so no extra pod this week. Maybe we'll do one next week. We'll see. But we'll be back as, same days as usual, Tuesdays and Thursdays. So until then, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Again, last weekend without college football. Week 0 starts next weekend. So take that into account. The next time we're here on Tuesday, we'll be doing game breakdowns, or at least one of them. We're going to do TCU and UNC, and that's probably going to be it. More likely, I don't think we'll be breaking down like UNLV Memphis. Although, yes, it is a big game for the G5 and whatnot, but it's not necessarily a game with the in terms of the SEO, search engine optimization. Not really a game that really that's going to search very well and do a lot of numbers. But UNC and TCU is going to do a lot of numbers and going to make sure it's not going to be a total crap fest on Bill Belichick. But, oh, well, is what it is. It's a dicey situation up there in Chapel Hill. But anyway, next time you see us, we'll be doing that. We'll also be debuting our model. So we'll be debuting that, our little predictive model we've created here to help us kind of get a gauge on what its point spread is and compare it to all the to the numbers that Vegas has out there. So we'll be doing that next week. I can't wait for that. That should be exciting. So until then, on Tuesday, take care. Have a great rest of your weekend. Have a great rest of your week. And we'll see you guys